A lot of people wondered what I did my dissertation research on, so this video will delve into it. Stay tuned. So the title of my dissertation is a long one, so stay with me. It was The Impact of Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy on Self-Stigma Attitudes Within an African American Male Living with Schizophrenia. Hold on, a case study. World's longest dissertation topic, right? But dissertations are like that. So what I basically wanted to look at is how does stigma impact someone with schizophrenia? And this person that I worked with was an African American male. And I only worked specifically with him. So I got really good in-depth understanding of what it was like for him living with schizophrenia. So I want to talk to you about the research questions that I asked. I'm pulling them up because I don't remember everything by hand. But the first research question was, what is the influence of stigma on someone diagnosed with schizophrenia? And then the second research question is, what is the impact of REBT? If you're not familiar with REBT, it's Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, and it is the theory of choice that I use with clients and in my personal life. You can look at a video on that on my page. What is the impact of REBT on the influence of stigma on someone diagnosed with schizophrenia? So in other words, can REBT be helpful in reducing some of those stigma attitudes? Does it make it worse? Does it not do anything? So that was what my research study was about. It was on a 66-year-old African American male who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia very early on. So at the age of 18, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He shared with me that a lot of the reasons why he felt like he couldn't live a productive life is because of the stigma associated with his mental illness. Now, he didn't use those specific words, but he would tell me things like, the way people look at me, the way people treat me. I keep it a secret that I have schizophrenia because the minute I say that, or if I tell anybody, people run away from me. He really had a thing with the mental health community and the police. He felt like he was always the person to blame, and he always felt like he just didn't get the benefit of the doubt, and part of that had to do with schizophrenia. So what I did was I met with him for 8 sessions. We met twice a week. That was what we had always done. I had worked with this client about 5 years prior to doing my dissertation, so I had a really good relationship with him. And we had been meeting 2 times a week, so we didn't want to change that. We wanted to keep everything as consistent as possible. And I met with him, and what I did was apply REBT interventions to some of the thoughts and some of the events that he shared with me. And my hope was that REBT would be useful in decreasing stigma attitudes. So what happened with that? To document any change in ideas or thoughts or behaviors, we had to do pre and post assessments to figure out where was my client when we first started versus where we are after the interventions in regards to his stigma attitudes. And remember, we're talking about self-stigma. So this is how he thought about himself. So the tools that I used, the clinical tools that I used were the Self-Stigma of Mental Illness Scale, or SSMIS, created by King et al. In 2007. The Internalized Stigma of Mental Illness Scale, or ISMI, by Richter et al. 2003. And the Discrimination and Stigma Scale, or DISC-12, by Broman et al. 2013. You should know that these assessments all had different purposes. So both the Self-Stigma of Mental Illness Scale and the Internalized Stigma of Mental Illness Scale were pre and post. So he got one at the beginning of our time and then after. And then the Discrimination and Stigma Scale was a baseline. So it basically told us where his thinking started off. So that didn't need a post-assessment. These assessments ask questions about how he saw himself in relation to his mental illness, how he thought others saw him. It really gathered a lot of information on self-stigma attitude. So if you want to check out those assessments, I gave you the information to find out about them. So at the end of our 8 sessions, and at the end of me using specific REBT interventions, we found out that the client's self-stigma increased. And what I mean by that is we found out that the client's awareness of self-stigma increased. Now, I know that sounds bad, but hear me out. His self-awareness increased, not his self-stigma. So what does that mean? That basically means that he had some awareness of the self-stigma that he was dealing with before we started doing our counseling sessions together that specifically targeted these ideas. But at the end, he was more aware of other thoughts that he didn't even know he had. He didn't even know to identify them as self-stigma. So that increased. And because that increased, when he took those assessments at the end, the score raised. It was like, oh, ding, 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 ding. And the reason why is because he had more awareness of what self-stigma was, how much it impacted him, and he identified things that he didn't originally, like in the pretest, he didn't originally identify as self-stigma. So of course, naturally, those numbers would go up. What does this implicate? This means that if we could get more people to be more self-aware of what stigma is, how it impacts other people, and what it might look like, we could possibly decrease self-stigma attitudes because we're now aware of what they are. We can use more supportive language. We can use more supportive ideas that aren't stigmatizing, that aren't stereotyping, that aren't prejudiced, that does not discriminate, and that does not perpetuate the stigma associated with mental illness. If people come in like that, like my client didn't come in that aware, he had some awareness, but not that aware. If they come in at that high level of awareness, then REBT could definitely help impact the severity of symptoms. We noticed that his anxiety and paranoia symptoms did decrease because he was able to say, hey, those thoughts that I was having about being paranoid or having this anxiety were out of proportion to what was really happening, and it was based on the stigma associated with those symptoms. So those things did decrease for him, and it was very helpful. It's something that he said that he would use moving forward. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us and did pass away. But in the time from the end of our sessions to, when he passed away, he did use it and he found it useful. It took a lot of work and it was a lot of effort, and every day was a struggle when it came to this, but I did notice some changes, and it was very helpful. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful for other people. If you want to know more about my dissertation, it isn't published, it's unpublished. I'd be happy to consult with you about it and give you some more specifics about the interventions and the tools that I used. But I'm hoping this explanation kind of talked about the root of this channel and where my passion kind of lies. You can see that it is not something that I just talk about, but I do it in my profession. So I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.